I sat across from her with my children, Caleb and Ava. Caleb was 16, tall and slim, wearing a button-down shirt from a second-hand shop that I'd helped him choose the previous week. Ava was 13, and her dress was second-hand from our neighbor. They looked neat and tidy. But compared to Andrew's children, Ryan and Chloe, who were dressed in designer labels, the difference was striking. Andrew made comments throughout the afternoon. Light-hearted, sarcastic remarks, so subtle that most people didn't catch them, but I caught every single one. "It's good not to worry about private school fees," he'd said earlier, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "State schools are much easier." I smiled and nodded. Let it go. But then it was dessert time, and Andrew seemed to have decided that hints were no longer effective. "Ryan, Chloe, tell everyone about Paris," he said, leaning back in his chair with that satisfied smile I'd known since childhood. They'd just been back last week. 5-star hotels, the Louvre, Versailles, they'd spent 2 weeks immersed in culture. Ryan, mimicking his father's vanity, launched into a detailed account of their holiday. Restaurants, shopping on the Champs-Élysées, their private tour guide. I saw Caleb's jaw clench. My son had been working nights at a grocery store for the past 4 months, stocking shelves on school nights, and giving me most of his paycheck to help with the rent. He never complained. Not once. "And where did your children go this summer, Laura?" asked Claire, Andrew's wife, in a voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She knew exactly where we had gone. I said quietly, "There's nowhere else to go. We stayed in our area." Caleb had his job. Ava was at football camp. "Soccer camp?" Andrew repeated the question as if I'd said something funny. "Right. The free camp is in the public park." Ava looked down at her plate. Caleb tightened his grip on his fork. I said calmly, "Free software is fine. Ava has learned a lot." "Absolutely, absolutely," Andrew said, waving his hand dismissively. "Not everyone can afford the European experience. Priorities are different. Some people focus on—" He paused, looking at Caleb. "Working in grocery stores, building character, I suppose." My mother, sitting near Andrew, laughed a little loudly. She had always preferred him, the successful son. The one who had a good marriage, climbed the career ladder, and bought the big house in the right suburb. I said in a quiet voice, "Caleb works very hard. I'm proud of him." Andrew said, "Oh, I'm sure of it. Minimum wage builds character. It's much better than, say, a summer internship at an investment firm." He pointed to Ryan. Ryan spent his summer learning about portfolio management and building relationships with my colleagues. It was truly career building. I saw Caleb's face turn red with embarrassment. He kept staring at his untouched candy. Then Andrew pounced, saying, "Your kids shop at second-hand stores while mine go on holiday to Europe." He laughed, looking around the table for validation. "I mean, it's the truth, isn't it? Different tax brackets, different lifestyles. No need to be ashamed, Laura. You're doing the best you can with what you have." My son's features had changed. I saw 16 years of quiet dignity fading in his eyes. That child who had worked 40 hours a week in addition to his studies, who had never asked for anything, who had handed me his wages without hesitation, who had worn second-hand clothes without complaint. Something in his expression broke my heart and strengthened my resolve at the same time. I took out my phone, checking my email as if I'd just remembered something. The others at the table moved on to other conversations, but Andrew kept glancing at me, pleased with his performance. I stood up quietly. "Regarding those holidays," I said loudly amidst the noise of the audience, and silence fell over the table. "The trust fund is covering the expenses. I am its trustee. As for the loan for your beach house, I just bought it." Andrew's smile froze. "What?" I continued calmly. "Tomorrow at noon, you will know why you should have read the guardianship documents left by our grandfather. The ones I managed for 15 years. "Laura, what are you talking about?" My mother's voice had a tone of panic. I looked at Andrew and said, "You know the monthly dividends you get. The ones that paid for Paris, Ryan's private school, the down payment on this house, and that new Tesla in your driveway." Andrew said, "This is my inheritance," but his voice was trembling. I said, "No, it's my grandfather's estate. He left me as its sole trustee when I turned 25. You receive monthly payments at my discretion. I have agreed to every payment for 15 years without ever mentioning my role. I believe that the family should support each other." Claire's face paled. "Andrew, what are you talking about? The beach house in South Haven?" I continued. "The one I bought 5 years ago? I took out a $400,000 mortgage. Last month, the bank sold that loan to a private investment group. I am that private investment group." Andrew stood up. "You're lying." I opened my email and turned the phone towards him. "Tomorrow at noon, you will meet with the law firm of Patterson and Partners. They are trust lawyers. They will explain to you in detail how the trust works, including the clause that allows me to reduce or cancel distributions if it turns out that they are not being used optimally." Andrew said, "You can't do that," but he seemed hesitant. "Of course I can. My grandfather's instructions were specific. The money was meant to support family members who demonstrated financial responsibility, humility, and kindness, not to fund vanity. My mother grabbed my arm and said, "Laura, don't be silly. Andrew deserves this money." I simply asked, "Why?" "Because it's successful." "It's a success because I agreed to distribute $85,000 each year for the past 15 years. That's $1.2 million, Mom. Money I could have used. Money that could have paid for Caleb's college education fund, Ava's activities, and bought a house instead of the apartment we rent." Silence hung over the table. Caleb stared at me with wide eyes. I continued. "Instead, I approved every single distribution Andrew requested. European trips, private schools, country club membership, and the investment in his company 5 years ago. Remember that, Andrew? $50,000 when your startup needed capital. That came from the trust fund, too." Andrew whispered. "I didn't know you controlled it." "No, you didn't. Because I never told you. Because I thought we were a family. And because when my grandfather made me a guardian, he told me that money should flow quietly, without vanity, to support those who need it." "Laura, Andrew didn't mean it," Claire said despairingly. I said, "Yes, he did. He meant every word he said, just as he meant every condescending comment over the past decade. Every reminder that his children go to a private school, every reference to vacations we can't afford, every subtle hint about our clothes, our car, and our neighborhood." I looked at Caleb and said, "Do you want to know why we shop at secondhand clothing stores? Because I chose to live solely on my teacher salary. Every penny of the trust fund I set aside for Andrew was because I believed that supporting family was more important than pride." "What's your salary as a teacher?" My mother seemed confused. "I'm a high school English teacher, Mom. My salary is $48,000 a year. The trust fund generates about $200,000 a year. I could take half of it, and Andrew would still have plenty left. I could have bought a house years ago. I could have sent my children to private schools. I could have taken them to Europe." "Why didn't you do that?" Ava asked quietly. "Because I wanted you to understand the value of work, humility, and not judging people based on their tax income." I looked at Andrew and said, "Lessons that not everyone seems to learn." Androgles sighed heavily. "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow, your lawyers will present you with revised distribution terms. You will receive $25,000 annually from now on. This amount is sufficient to supplement your current income, which is substantial. However, it is not enough to cover your current lifestyle expenses." $25,000? Claire's voice trailed off. "We can't maintain this house on that amount." I said, "Exactly. So you'll need to make choices. Like whether you really need a house that size, whether a private school is necessary, and whether Europe is a priority." I glanced at the mortgage papers on my phone. Beach house mortgage. Monthly payments $3,200. I will demand full repayment of the loan within 60 days. 60 days? We can't pay $400,000 in 60 days. So you'll sell it or refinance it with another bank, if they agree to your request without the trust fund's income guarantees. I paused for a moment. "Or you can ask politely. Explain why you think you deserve an extension. Be humble." Andrew's face turned red. "You're doing this because I made one comment." "One comment?" I almost laughed. "Andrew, you've been making comments for 10 years. On every occasion. On every birthday. At every family gathering. You've made my children feel inferior because we don't live your lifestyle. A lifestyle you funded while I was raising 2 children on a teacher's salary." He said in a weak voice, "I didn't know." She didn't care to know. She saw me struggling and felt superior instead of curious. She felt entitled instead of grateful. My mother regained her voice. "Laura, this is cruel. He's your brother." I replied, "I'm his sister, the one he humiliated in front of the whole family." Again, I looked at Caleb, whose son works 40 hours a week to help pay the rent, while Andrew's son is training at his father's company to gain experience. I started gathering our things. "We're leaving. Caleb, Ava, take your coats." Andrew said, "Wait, can we talk about this tomorrow?" "At the lawyer's office. 12 o'clock. I helped Ava put on her jacket. "Bring your financial statements. All of them. Income, expenses, assets, and debts. The lawyers will need to review everything before restructuring the distributions." "Restructuring?" Hope crept into his voice. "The purpose of this will is to support the family, not to enable egos. If you can demonstrate that you understand this, and if you can show real change, then we will talk about appropriate levels of support." I looked him in the eye and said, "But Andrew, the days of blank checks while you mock my children are over." We headed towards the door. Caleb hadn't said a word since I'd told him. In the car, there was silence for several minutes. Then Caleb spoke up, saying, "Have you been giving him money all this time?" "Yes. For 15 years. While we..." Then he stopped talking. "While we were living a modest life." "Yes." Avon leaned forward from the back seat. "Why?" I drove for a while before answering. "Because when my grandfather died, he told me that the money was for the family. He made me promise to use it to help my loved ones. I thought Andrew needed it more than us. He was starting his own business and building his family. I thought I was doing the right thing. Caleb asked, "Was that right? Was it the right thing to do?" I confessed, "I don't know anymore. I wanted you both to grow up knowing that money isn't everything, that morals matter, that work ethic matters, and that kindness matters. I think I've succeeded in that. Look at you, Caleb. You're 16, you work nights to help your family, and you never complain. That's morality." "Cousins Andrew wouldn't do that," Ava said calmly. "No," I agreed. "They won't do that. And that's the difference money makes when it comes without being earned." He remained silent for another minute. Then he asked, "Will you really stop him?" "I will restructure the distributions to be appropriate. He has a good job and a high salary. He doesn't need $85,000 a year from the trust fund. That was an enabler for him, not an aid." Ava asked, "What will you do with the extra money?" She smiled. "Well, there's something called a college education fund. And maybe we could look into a small house. Not something luxurious, but something just for us." "And what about Europe?" Caleb asked, with a hint of humor in his voice. "Maybe one day. When we save up for it ourselves. Then it will make sense." We drove back to our small apartment, furnished with thrift stores and everything secondhand. For the first time in years, I felt no shame about it, but rather proud of the two wonderful children sitting next to me. The next day, Andrew reviewed the details. He saw the figures, the terms, and the conditions. He fully understood how the past 15 years had been funded. He learned he owed the entire mortgage on his beach house in 60 days. He learned his annual distributions would be reduced to $25,000. He learned that continued support required annual financial audits and proof of charitable donations. And most importantly, he learned that his sister, whom he had mocked, had been his donor all along. 2 months later, Andrew sold the beach house. 6 months later, Ryan transferred to a public school. A year later, Andrew started volunteering at a food bank. And for the first time in our adult lives, he asked me about my life instead of talking about his. It took time. Real change always takes time. But the day Andrew came to our apartment with a donation to Caleb's college fund, equal to the amount Caleb had earned that year working nights, I knew something had changed. He didn't apologize with words, but with understanding and humility, and with the kind of reciprocal family support. This is worth more than any distributions to trust funds could provide.
सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर बढ़ता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दूर बढ़ता है मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू मेरी रूह का मका तू लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा मगर खामोश है दुनिया कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर, दर्द का असर।